Greetings, true believers, and welcome to another uncanny episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This show is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls, you can head over to patreon.com/MaryMarvelite and sign up for as little as $1 a month. This week's story begins with the West African gods known as the Voodoo. Although often called by different names, these gods were worshipped by various peoples as early as the 12th century. Their skyfather, Buluku, was a member of the Council of Godheads along with Odin, Zeus, and the other Allfathers of Earth's godly pantheons. However, the two Voodoo that are important for today's story are Dam Aido Wede, the serpent god of the dead, and his twin brother Sagbata, the maligned god of death and disease. In the 16th century, at the start of the Atlantic slave trade, tens of thousands of enslaved African people were forcibly transported to the Caribbean islands by ruthless European captors. Among the slaves were worshippers of the Voodoo, and they were followed to the island of Hispaniola by Dam Aido and Sagbata. There, in the area that would eventually become known as Haiti, some captive Africans took solace from their worship of the Voodoo, while elements of Catholicism were incorporated into their faith. Their ignorant overlords came to refer to this religion as Vaudo or Voodoo due to confusion with the French movement Vaudois, and eventually the latter name stuck. Meanwhile, the serpent god Dam Aido Wede reinvented his image to align with Western culture and took the name Damballa. However, it's important to note that this isn't the first time that this name has been used. Eons prior, the elder god and original serpent, Set, created a monstrous offspring also known as Damballa. It's possible that the Voodoo Damballa claimed this name in an attempt to usurp the previous Damballa's worshippers. After all, the Egyptian god Seth had already done a similar thing with the original serpent Set. To the voodoo practitioners, the Voodoo serpent passed on the idea that he was their skyfather, and so many of them would invoke Damballa rather than Buluku. Damballa's twin brother, Sagbata, also reinvented himself, taking the alias Baron Samedi, often manifesting a more human appearance with a black top hat and tailcoat. Meanwhile, by the 17th century, the area had become home to notorious French pirates who made their headquarters on the island of Tortuga off the northwest coast of Hispaniola. One of these freebooters was a man known as Captain Tiger, who traveled with his two large-muscled companions, twin brothers and former slaves, Laurent and Alexandre. Because of his exceptional strength and eyesight, it's rumored that Tiger was descended from the enigmatic race known as the Cat People. He also had a disdain for slavery, which often put him into conflict with another pirate, the ruthless human trafficker Boutefeu. One night, under cover of darkness, Boutefeu and his men ambushed and abducted Tiger's companion, Alexandre. The pirates took the former slave to an African-born witch doctor, Shango, and offered him riches in exchange for an unquestioning army. To this end, the witch doctor sacrificed Alexandra to the Voodoo god Sagbata. In turn, Sagbata conferred with the elder god of chaos, Cthan. Like his brother Set, Cthan was one of the original elder gods who predated the rest of Earth's divine pantheons. With dark magic provided by Cthan, Sagbata reanimated Alexandra's corpse, transforming him into a mindless thrall. While necromancy had been practiced by Earth's sorcerers for millennia, Alexandra became the first of a new breed of zombie. However, he would not be the last, as Shango soon provided Boutefeu with a legion of mindless servants. Captain Tiger confronted his rival, leading to a battle between pirates and zombies. The other Voodoo, meanwhile, agreed that since one of their own was responsible for this plague, they should provide some divine intervention. However, they were unable to directly undo a magical spell crafted by an elder god. And so one of the Voodoo, Legba, instead traveled to Earth to aid Alexandra's brother, Laurent. Legba empowered Laurent, giving him the powers of the Loa, elemental spirits who served the Voodoo. The spell he used to do this was written by another elder god, albeit a far more benevolent one, Gaia. Laurent battled Shango, but with Cthan empowering him, the old witch doctor gained the upper hand over his younger opponent. However, Legba had given Laurent one more of Gaia's spells to use, which when spoken called forth the spirit of his brother to join with him. With two souls inhabiting one body, the brothers together defeated and killed Shango. This caused Botefu's zombie minions to fall lifeless, allowing Captain Tiger to strike a killing blow against his enemy. The two allies later parted ways as friends, with Tiger returning to Europe and Laurent remaining in the Caribbean. From there, history unfolded as Tiger's grandson participated in the French Revolution and slavery was thankfully abolished in Haiti. Laurent, meanwhile, inspired several successors over the years, some of which became known as Brother Voodoo. Eventually, the title of Lord of the Loa was passed on to a man who, in his old age, became known as Papa Jambo. It was during his tenure that the twins, Daniel and Jericho Drumm, were born in Haiti's capital city of Port-au-Prince. They grew up surrounded by local folklore, and while Jericho was skeptical, Daniel embraced the legends and traditions. One day while the two were children, two of their schoolmates harassed and mocked a homeless man on a train. One boy, Obed, threatened to throw the vagrant's belongings from the moving vehicle before Jericho stepped in to stop him. However, the bullies then intended to force Daniel to do it instead. When Obed threatened to hit Daniel, Jericho jumped in and tossed the bag off the train himself, concerned only with protecting his brother. But then the homeless man rose and claimed to put a curse on Jericho for his weakness. This terrified the two boys and they quickly ran home. However, remaining on the train, the unstable old man arrived there first and murdered the twins' parents. He claimed that there was no escape from his curse and that the only way for Jericho to protect his remaining family was to run away. The boys were watched over by their aunt Matilda after that, and despite the supposed curse likely being nothing more than the ramblings of an insane old man, Jericho Drumm did eventually leave. He moved to the United States where he embraced science and medicine. Excelling in scholarly matters, Jericho Drumm became an author, received extensive medical training, and earned a PhD in psychology. Daniel remained in Haiti and followed a different path, studying the ways of voodoo under the Lord of the Loa, Papa Jambo. At some point, Daniel also fathered a daughter named Colette. Then one day, a man appeared in Haiti claiming to be Damballa himself. In reality, this was a man named Haswe Kaulev who channeled Damballa's power through a magical amulet called a Wangal. However, it was not the Voodoo god Damballa who had empowered Kaulev, but the evil spawn of the elder god Set. So we now have three separate entities who use the name Damballa. There's the original, who was created by the elder god Set billions of years ago, the Voodoo god Dam Aida Wede, who took the name Damballa after following his worshippers from Africa to the Caribbean, and the human Yoswe Kaulev, who claimed to be the Voodoo god while actually channeling the power of the Set spawn. Specifics aside, Daniel Drumm, now an accomplished Hungan, or a voodoo priest, recognized Kaulev as a false god. However, the human Damballa crafted a doll-sized effigy to afflict Daniel with a deadly Wanga spell. Slowly dying from his magical ailment, Daniel Drumm reached out to his brother asking him to come home, which he did. Upon arriving, Jericho was attacked by followers of the false Damballa. However, Drumm was no weakling and was able to defend himself and chase away his attackers. He proceeded to his childhood home, reuniting with his aunt and brother. Daniel explained what had happened, and Jericho, disbelieving of magic and voodoo, attempted to use his medical knowledge to treat him. However, as he did, the imposter Damballa drew closer to the house. Daniel pleaded with his brother to seek out the Lord of the Loa, Papa Jambo, and ask for his help. At that moment, Damballa plunged his blade into the doll of Daniel Drumm. Daniel screamed in pain as his mortal life came to an unjust end. Enraged, Jericho stepped outside to confront Damballa, going so far as to attack him physically. Empowered by set-spawned magic, Cowlev retaliated, savagely beating Jericho but leaving him alive. His Aunt Matilda helped him back to the house, and Jericho decided that Damballa needed to be stopped, whether his claims were true or not. The following morning, he wrapped his brother's body in canvas and loaded it onto the jeep as he headed out into the jungle in search of Papa Jambo. When the foliage became too thick to drive, he continued on foot with his brother on his back. Even being attacked by a boa constrictor, ostensibly sent by Damballa, was not enough to deter him. However, after hours of travel, exhaustion finally overtook his determination, and Jericho Drumm collapsed. Jericho awakened sometime later in the home of Papa Jambo, who had found and recovered him. The elderly Hungan refused to return with Jericho, but instead offered to teach him as he had taught Daniel. And so, at the old man's insistence, Jericho Drumm clad himself in his brother's sacred clothes. Sure enough, as he learned, he began to believe, and as he believed, his powers grew. He learned to commune with the lower spirits and ask for their aid. He gained total immunity to heat and fire, and even control over flames. And he learned how to command plants and animals, and to a lesser extent other people. With Jericho's training complete, the two men performed one final ritual. They summoned forth the spirit of Daniel Drumm and bound it to Jericho's body, doubling his strength. As a result, his forehead was marked and a streak of white appeared in his hair. Indeed, Jericho had taken his brother's place and continued the legacy that Laurent and Alexandra had started generations prior. He had become the new Brother Voodoo. Having fulfilled his duty of training a worthy successor, Papa Jambo, who had already lived far beyond his natural lifespan, allowed himself to pass away. The next day, the imposter Damballa gathered together a cadre of cult leaders from across the world to declare his supremacy. However, Brother Voodoo soon arrived to challenge the false god once again. This time the two were more evenly matched physically, but Damballa still had control over his legion of serpents. However, the spirit of Daniel Drumm emerged from Jericho's body to possess one of Damballa's allies. Daniel removed the amulet which gave the false god his power, causing the snakes to turn and kill Yosue Cowlev. One of Damballa's servants, a man named Bamboo, then pledged his loyalty to Brother Voodoo, recognizing him as the new Lord of the Loa. Bamboo accompanied Drumm to his mansion home just outside New Orleans' French Quarter. However, Damballa wouldn't be the only human to claim the identity of a voodoo god, and soon a criminal calling himself Baron Samedi appeared. He worked with the terrorist group Advanced Idea Mechanics, using science to transform people into mindless thralls called Zuvembis. These Zuvembis were similar to the zombies created by the real Baron Samedi, Sagbata, but not truly undead. However, the name would later be applied to real zombies as well. This plot was foiled by Brother Voodoo, and the Zuvembis had their minds restored. Jericho Drumm continued to operate both in Haiti and in America, battling villains who would misuse voodoo magic for their own purposes. For example, he battled the sinister Black Talon and defeated his evil cult. During this adventure, Jericho rescued a woman named Laura Lee Tate. A romance seemed to develop between them, but it didn't ultimately last. Another foe, Dramabu, went so far as to raise Papa Jambo as a true zombie. This villain was also defeated by Brother Voodoo, and his zombified minions were able to rest in peace once again. Soon, Drumm began using his voodoo expertise to aid other heroes when their paths crossed. For example, together he and Spider-Man battled the malevolent Loa known as Moondog. He rescued the vampire hunter, Frank Drake, from a group of zombies and encouraged him to continue his war against Dracula. He aided the werewolf, Jack Russell, against the zombie forces of the mystical being known as Dr. Glitter Knight. and he joined forces with the Thing to rescue the Black Panther and other influential members of the black community from an evil plot involving a zombie vampire. Later, Jericho attempted to increase his powers by using the wangle that was worn by the false Damballa. However, the real Damballa, not the voodoo god but the evil spawn of Set, used this opportunity to cling to the spirit of Jericho's brother Daniel. Seizing control of their shared body, Damballa set fire to Jericho's mansion, badly injuring his servant Bambu. Dr. Strange discovered Brother Voodoo's possession, but Damballa fled while still connected to Daniel's soul. He possessed a python, transforming it into a deadly new body, but was ultimately exorcised by Dr. Strange. Strange then separated Damballa from the spirit he'd inhabited, returning Daniel Drumm to his brother's body and sealing the spawn of Set within the amulet. Brother Voodoo was later part of the Grandmaster's Contest of Champions. He fought alongside Moon Knight to stop a terrorist who was raising zombies in Haiti, and he aided Dr. Strange, his Minotaur apprentice, Rintra, and Morbius the Living Vampire in a battle against the Voodoo priestess Marie Laveau. Unfortunately, Laveau used Drumm's ally Bambu as a sacrifice to resurrect the original vampire lord Varney. Following this, Jericho fell into a loneliness and turned to the woman he'd previously saved, Lauralee. However, she eventually decided to leave and pursue her education. In his desperation, Jericho rashly used his powers to stop her, but was so overcome by guilt over this that he quickly released her. Attempting to regain his focus, he turned his attention towards writing and later abandoned the name and costume of Brother Voodoo for a time. However, he still offered his knowledge and talents whenever they were needed. He later resettled in New Orleans, where he joined forces with the vampire hunters Blade and Hannibal King to defeat an alliance between Marie Laveau and the vampire Deacon Frost. When Laveau attempted to summon and command Damballa, the actual voodoo god appeared, and Jericho convinced him to turn against her. Regaining his confidence, he started to again wear his sacred garb and stopped shying away from his title. Feeling at home in New Orleans, he later fought alongside a local mutant, Gambit, against another zombie army. He also fought alongside Blade, Black Panther, and several others during a vampire outbreak in Louisiana. He also continued to help people across the world and was briefly recruited into S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Howling Commandos unit. After the passing of the controversial Superhuman Registration Act, despite disagreeing with the principles behind it, Brother Voodoo registered as a practicing mystic. He spent some time in the African nation of Wakanda, but then returned to the United States. He continued to operate out of Louisiana and provided magical assistance to those who needed it. And of course, his brother's spirit was with him the entire time. However, Jericho would gain even greater power after Dr. Strange stepped down from the position of Sorcerer Supreme. Strange's mystic amulet, the Eye of Agamotto, chose Jericho Drumm to be his successor. Accepting this responsibility, Jericho gave himself a new costume and a new name, henceforth becoming known as Dr. Voodoo. His first act as Sorcerer Supreme was to help Dr. Strange and the Son of Satan banish the dread Dormammu from the Earth once again. As Dr. Voodoo, he protected his plane of reality from all manner of mystic threat, including the extra-dimensional Nightmare. To this end, he both fought against and alongside the morally complex Dr. Doom. While as Jericho Drumm, he helped run a non-profit clinic in New Orleans. However, his tenure as Sorcerer Supreme ended when Jericho Drumm sacrificed his own life to save the Avengers and stop a demonic invasion from the light dimension that was being conducted by the first Sorcerer Supreme, Agamotto. Having been cast back to Earth, the disembodied spirit of Daniel Drumm blamed Dr. Strange and the Avengers for his brother's death and used his powers of possession in an attempt to take vengeance. But Dr. Strange was able to exorcise the vengeful soul and regained the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme. However, this wasn't the end for Dr. Voodoo. After a spell backfired and caused the Scarlet Witch to turn villainous, Dr. Doom made a Faustian bargain to resurrect Jericho Drumm and reunited him with the spirit of his brother to help combat her. After that crisis was resolved, Dr. Voodoo continued to operate as a hero and became an Avenger himself. In fact, a romance later blossomed between him and the Scarlet Witch. Meanwhile, after spending so much time as a spirit, Daniel Drumm longed to be restored to life. However, Jericho insisted that such a thing was beyond his power. Daniel later betrayed his brother and the Avengers by making a deal with the ninja death cult, the Hand, who used their own dark magic to restore his body. This, however, stained his soul, and in order to cleanse it, he was later killed again by the former Hand ninja Elektra. This caused a repentant Daniel to once again join with his brother until his debt was repaid. And so, with his strength again enhanced by his brother's spirit, Jericho Drumm has continued to aid the heroes of Earth and safeguard the world against mystic threats as Dr. Voodoo. That's all I've got for you today, but thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, share the video, and subscribe for more marvelous content. Be sure to leave a comment letting me know what Marvel hero or villain you want to hear about next, and as always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page where for only $1 a month you can get your name in these special thanks here. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!